Fall of 1915. Germany's turn. Take the event card. We have flamethrowers. So, okay, and that card will be kept to one side, and we can use that when we attack into trenches. Basically, it lets us have a buff in the when we attack trenches. No marker though, because that is a special card that came with the second edition. It's an optional card which I've chosen to include in the game. But one thing it does let us do is draw a second card, which is going to be Bled White. So choose a German controlled area with at least one army. The first French army defeated this turn by a German army in the selected area with a 3+ differential is removed from the map. Okay, and return to the force pool. Fine. So what that means is, if Germany beat France with a +3 difference between their attack roll and the defending roll, the French army is removed back to supply, or the supply of units, rather than eliminated from the game. Normally you're removed from the map. The units are eliminated, but not in this case. Okay, so Germany, movement. Well, the Somme. Goodness me. Goodness me. We have 4 defending units there, 5 units there. We could potentially take back that region in Germany. That's kind of one of the regions in Germany currently occupied. But we do have a risk, if we concentrate our attacks here, that the Somme could fall. Potentially, there's going to be a problem in the Rhine. Potentially, Bavaria and Hanover could fall this turn. All in all, things do not look particularly good for the Germans. They really don't. Let's take the most advantage that we can of these cards, and we'll attack into the Dun. Try to take some of the teeth out of the French in the Western Front with those 2 units there. I kind of do feel like I need to move somebody from the Western Front. I mean, we could lose the Somme. Losing the Somme is not the worst thing that could happen to the Germans, because they could just retreat into Belgium. Losing Bavaria would be a massive problem. Losing Berlin would be worse. Okay, let's do that. Let's move 1 to Bavaria to try and stop any advance by these guys. And that'll be all the movement I do for Germany. Oh, I will move those 2 up there. Okay, cool. Right, German attacks. Only place really to attack would be here and there. But now that I've moved that unit, I can't actually attack and push back these guys. So I may not actually attack on the Eastern Front, believe it or not, because I could then use some of the production I'm saving from refitting those units to add in more units. That's probably sensible. So the attack then is only going to happen here. Now flamethrowers, I do need to check the rules to see what happens with those. Basically the flamethrower card stays in the game, and you just get an automatic +2 whenever you're attacking into trenches. Is it like all the time? No, it's a one-time use, but you can keep it back. But I think I will. Do you know, I don't think I'll use it. I don't think I'll attack anywhere this turn with the Germans. I think I'll literally just keep all of the attacks to a minimum and refit the armies. That's what I'll do. Right. Meaning that card is basically not used. The bled white card is basically not used. Flamethrowers can be kept for a later turn. The only thing to do is the German fleet combat, which is 2 dice for the 2 fleets owned by Germany, and we've got a 2 damage, but it's 3 dice in return for the Western Allies, and they've done 3 damage. Right, okay, so 2 damage for the Western Allies will be 1, 2 spent. The 3 damage on the German fleet will be 1, 2, and then 1 removed for the 3rd point of damage, and then retreating back to the high seas area. Well, that's terrible for the Germans. Truly terrible. Okay, production. Just 1 submarine in the unrestricted warfare box, meaning we just roll 2 dice. That's 11. Nothing happens. That's good. So 8 production points. That is 4. 5. Being fresh as a German fleet will stop an amphibious invasion into Belgium. 3 points remaining, and I'll take 2 units. Well, actually, 1 unit into Berlin, and then a trench into Berlin, because Germans only pay 1 for their trenches. Okay, fine, that's done. Nothing else to do from a German point of view apart from the technology card. Which is planned barrages. We still can't do anything in terms of those cards because we don't have the lower down card to use it. Things are not going well at all for the Central Powers in this game. Last thing then, I keep saying last thing, but definitely the last thing is to re-roll or roll for the dogfights and air superiority. But we can already assume that we have air superiority because the British do not have any aircraft at the moment. So I won't roll, but I'll just keep that unit there. As I've mentioned before, that may not be quite correct, but it's how I've done it for the purposes of this video. That card was used in the attack earlier when I just removed. Right. It is now the Western Allies, so let's do an event card. Okay, Italy joins the Triple Entente, so Italy are already in the game, so that card just gets discarded. Okay, so now two counters to move. We don't have a great deal of forces here as the French, but we have got some production coming our way to refit what is there, meaning I think the 2 units we can move are Italy and then the Brits down here into Italy. And this really is a interesting question now, because the Brits could, or the Western Allies could come into Vienna, force a collapse of Vienna, of the Austro-Hungarian army. That would be pretty awesome at this part of the game, and almost guarantee a defeat ultimately of the Central Powers. Or we could come up here into Bavaria, further hamper German production. It would delay, I think, the end of the game, but I think ultimately a success there would also result in a Central Powers loss eventually. I'm so tempted to do the collapse or try the collapse of Vienna. Got 3 armies against 2. We would need to be careful though, because the Germans could potentially come in and cut off supply. We'd have to bear that in mind. Okay, let's see how we go. For the British, I won't do any movements or attacking on these 2 tracks. I think we're fine. We don't need to worry too much about going into Turkey just yet. There's enough for us to focus on in the middle. Not threatened by production, or our production is not threatened at the moment by the Germans or the Turks. We're good for a while. So let's concentrate on the map then. And I think we will go for what will we do? That's a good question. What will we do? So if we attack here and we can get into Bavaria, we're cutting supply. There'll be no supply for this group here. And then we really would have to see what happens in terms of the supply rules, wouldn't we? We're probably going to have to edit some of this thinking time out of the video. Let's attack Hungary. If we can attack Hungary and successfully cause a collapse of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, essentially the Germans will be isolated almost completely. They'll be very, very hard for them to do anything to stop that Russian advance before later in the game, which we may not get to. The Russian Revolution happens and causes problems in Russia. Okay, but let's see what happens here. First up, we'll have the attack from the Italians against the Austro-Hungarians. We have a 3. This is a 5. Well, that was a pretty poor result straight away. What we could do is we could change the focus of our attack away from Vienna into Germany. Let's do that. We don't have to attack into the same place with all our armies. Let's do that. So it's 2 and 1 into Bavaria. So 4 and a 1. That's a good start. And then the British have a 5 plus the 1 for the Western Allies. That's a 6 then. And a 3. Okay, so we have to consider as Germany whether we do that they shall not pass, which means we need to eliminate completely that unit and roll the dice, and with a modified die roll hope to get 2+. I think we're going to have to, aren't we? So let's do that. We have a 5 minus the 1 eliminated unit. There are no other eliminated units for the Germans, meaning there's no advance by the Western Allies, but that unit does come off out of the game. We only have 1 unit fresh there, so an attack into the Rhine is probably not going to help much. I'm going to stop there. I'll stop there, and I will have units refitted instead. So U-boat attacks, there's just 2 dice to roll, because there's only 1 fresh U-boat. That is an 11. The attack was unsuccessful. That was an 11. An unsuccessful attack, therefore no effect on the British production. Starting with the lowest production value country, which is going to be Italy, we'll spend 1 to refit that Italian unit. The French have 3 plus the 1 transferred, that's 4. So we have 1, 2, 3 and 4. The Brits then will have their full 7, which makes a refreshing change. That's 1, 2. 3, 4. And I'll give 2 to Italy for next turn, and 1 to the French for next turn. Technology, it is the P2. We don't have P1, the Germans don't have P2, therefore that gets shuffled back in. Technology is not progressing super quickly in this game. Now we get to reset any artillery. No artillery. We don't have any aircraft, so there's no dogfights or anything like that. Straight on then to the Russians' turn, or the Eastern Allies' turn. We've drawn the Lusitania sunk card, and what that means is the US declares war track will move based on where the U-boats are in terms of these 2 boxes. Because we are in the unrestricted box, that track is moved 2 spaces. So they're that little bit closer to entering the war, the Americans. We may not get that far actually in the game as it's going at the moment, but that's what will happen eventually. Had the US, had the U-boats been in the Hague box, it would have only gone up 1. So that's the downside of having this unrestricted warfare box. Okay, so Russian movement. Good question. 1 fresh unit there, which I will move to here. And we now have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 units. And I have decided I'm going to ignore Berlin. I'm going to attack Bohemia and then try to get into Hanover and or Bavaria. Why not? So a 3+ for the attack into Bohemia. That's a 4, meaning 1 unit moves in. We'll move in 3 additional units, leaving 1 fresh. I didn't do any movement for the Russians. It didn't seem to be a lot of point. Next, we will attack into Hanover, which will be 3+ again. That is a 5. It was a 5, I promise, before I knocked it. So that will mean 1 unit will go into there. And then we will attack Bavaria. Same thing, it's production. So there's an additional point of defence. So it's a 3+. That's a 1. It's pretty poor. And that's where I'll actually, that is where I'll stop, because the Russians still only have 4 points of production, meaning they can only refit 4 of their units, and we've got 4 that need refitting, and there's quite a tenuous line there should Germans choose to attack, or even the Austro-Hungarians choose to attack. So let's see which ones we will refit. Definitely the one in Hanover, definitely these 2, and then also that one there in Prussia. Okay, now that has cut supply for these units here. They cannot get back to a German production site. So let's check the rules to see what happens there before we do anything else. This bunch of units in the Somme are cut off. They're out of supply, meaning they cannot be refit. They cannot move back into friendly territory because they're being blocked here. And basically it's a bit of a problem. As far as I understand, they can still fight and defend, but should they be in need of a refit, they cannot do that because they're not in land supply. Bit of a tricky situation with the Germans. So it's the Central Allies' turn though, and what we need to do now is try to get those guys back in supply. But how are we going to do that? Because these guys are not in. They're not. These are the only ones adjacent immediately, so we'll have to move. There's no adjacency there, you see, so I'll have to move these guys down to attack up, but then that might leave Vienna with issues. It may leave Poland free. We could try to attack here, breaking its supply and so on for these guys, but again, problematic. Bit of a tricky situation all around, but let's draw that event card and see what happens. Okay, so the Dardanelles forts are reinforced. So this impacts Gallipoli, and basically there's a special unit that has the counter battery ability that sits in Gallipoli and stays there basically until it's destroyed, but it cannot move or anything like that. But we'll just pop that there as a reminder that we can use that battery. But that's not very helpful up in the rest of the board. Movement though, Turkey can move a unit. I don't see why they would at this point, so we won't do any movement for Turkey. I am going to have to move these Austro-Hungarians down into Austria. Well, in order to break that, I'll have to move them down into Vienna and then attack up to try and cause problems with supply. That's problematic in its own right. The Triple Entente really do have the Central Powers on the back foot here. They really, really do. Okay, let's just try and attack here. So that's 3 defending Russian units against 4 attacking Central Ally units with a mountain division, allowing them to ignore that defensive buff. So let's start with the first Austro-Hungarian unit. They've rolled a 1. That's pretty poor against a 1. So +1, meaning the Austro-Hungarians are basically spent. Second Austro-Hungarian unit, it's a 5. That's better. Against the 6, no, not much better at all. The Austro-Hungarians only have 2 points of production, meaning if they keep going, they're going to really be stuck again on the production with a threat from Italy and Britain there into Vienna itself, and obviously there would be the threat from the Russians as well. So, interesting decision. Do we carry on? Do we not? I think it would be sensible not to, as the Central Allies, meaning Russia still has its stranglehold on Berlin. Okay, points of production, just 1 for the Turks, which will flip that unit there, and 2 for the Austro-Hungarians, both of which will mean they will be flipped, like so. And that's it for the Central Allies. I think we'll stop there and do a new video for winter 1915, when I do think, unless something drastic happens, I do think the game will start to come into its final stages. We may or may not get all the way to the end of this game, more likely not actually at this point, but we'll see how it goes for the next video or 2. Okay, I will pause this one here and come back for winter of 1915.